Germany built an organization that called itself an elite guard, a racial order, and a weapon of state security. But the men who benefited most from its fear were often the same men who later tried to distance themselves from it, treat it as a rival, or pretend it was someone else's machine. The SS was designed to be loyal to Adolf Hitler personally, yet it grew into a system so large — police, intelligence, camps, armed formations, economic offices — that even the Nazi leadership could not fully control where it ended and where the state began. The paradox is simple. The SS was created to protect the regime, but it also exposed what the regime truly was because it turned ideology into administration and violence into paperwork. Before we go deeper into how this decision changed the war forever, make sure to subscribe for more history that actually happened. In the mid-1920s, the SS began as a small protective formation within the Nazi Party's paramilitary world. At first, its task was straightforward: guard Hitler, secure meetings, enforce discipline on the street. But when Heinrich Himmler became Reichsführer SS in 1929, he saw something more ambitious: not just bodyguards, but a selective order built around ancestry checks, ideological reliability, and a cult of obedience. The SS was structured to create a category of men who believed they were chosen and who could be used for tasks the ordinary state could not perform openly. It was not simply another uniform. It was a method for separating power from law. The Nazi seizure of power in 1933 gave that method a state to inhabit. By the time the regime consolidated itself, the SS was no longer confined to party rituals or street violence. After the purge of June 30th to July 2nd, 1934, known as the Night of the Long Knives, Hitler declared the SS an independent organization. That decision mattered more than the propaganda posters ever admitted. It meant Himmler was no longer a subordinate to the SA chain of command. He became directly subordinate to Hitler himself. In practice, it created a channel of authority that ran around the normal ministries and the courts. It was an executive instrument that could be justified as necessary, exceptional, and political, which in the Nazi system meant beyond appeal. From the viewpoint of other Nazi leaders, this was both useful and dangerous. Useful because it solved problems with speed: arrests without warrants, imprisonment without trial, intimidation without signatures. Dangerous because it created a competing power base, an empire with its own uniforms, recruitment, budgets, and loyalties. Even inside a dictatorship, bureaucracies fight for territory. The critical structural turn came in the 1930s when Himmler moved from building an internal party guard to controlling the police. On June 17, 1936, Hitler appointed Himmler chief of the German police. It was a bureaucratic sentence that sounded like an administrative adjustment. In reality, it fused the SS with the machinery of state coercion. Himmler personally embodied the connection. He was simultaneously head of the SS and chief of the police. Police authority, arrest powers, investigations, prisons, could now be steered by SS ideology. This is where Nazi leadership perceptions begin to split into two tracks. Publicly, the SS could be presented as disciplined guardians of order. Internally, the SS became a political weapon in a regime that thrived on overlapping jurisdictions. The system was designed to compete for Hitler's favor, and the SS competed aggressively. By 1939, almost all police leadership posts were held by SS officers, even though many ordinary policemen were not SS members. Himmler never fully merged the institutions in law, but he merged them in command culture, staffing, and mission. War accelerated everything. On September 1, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Within weeks, Himmler created the Reich Security Main Office, RSHA, on September 27, 1939, combining the security police and the SS Security Service under a single headquarters structure. The RSHA formalized a deadly union, ideology plus administrative power. It became an engine that coordinated surveillance, arrests, deportations, and mass murder across occupied Europe, even though no single office controlled every aspect of the Holocaust. It was not only a police institution, it was a planning institution. For the Nazi leadership, this created a new reality. A regime built on charisma and propaganda had now embedded itself in file cabinets, forms, and departmental charts. RSHA offices were numbered, subdivided, and staffed by educated men, mostly in their 30s. The structure itself shows what Nazi leaders thought they were building, not a temporary emergency force, but an administrative state of ideological policing. At the top, Hitler benefited from the SS because it protected him and enforced the internal political order. But Hitler also benefited because the SS could do what the traditional state, the army, and even parts of the party could not admit to doing. The SS provided deniability inside a system that pretended to be lawful while acting outside law. In the Nuremberg prosecution's documentary record, the SS is described as a quasi-independent apparatus, connected to government and given official support, but able to carry out actions so that responsibility could be blurred between party and state. That was not an accident. It was a feature. As the war spread east, the SS gained new functions tied directly to conquest. The Nazi leadership pursued demographic reshaping, settlement, forced labor, and mass expulsion. Himmler's offices developed a language of population policy, Germanization, and racial evaluation. Behind that language was a clear operational result. People were categorized into who could be exploited, removed, or murdered. The SS was assigned leading responsibility for security, intelligence, the concentration camp system, and the regime's plans to restructure Eastern Europe. The Waffen-SS, the SS's combat arm, expanded as the war demanded manpower and the leadership demanded loyalty. Official descriptions emphasized its origin as a troop exclusively at my disposal, in Hitler's words, neither part of the Wehrmacht nor the police in its conception. That dual status mattered to Nazi leaders. It was a military force with a political identity, trained and recruited through SS structures, and shaped to serve both battlefield and internal security needs when ordered. This is where many Nazi leaders' views hardened into a practical calculation. The Wehrmacht could fight, the state ministries could administer, the party could mobilize propaganda. But only the SS combined coercion, intelligence, and ideological policing under a chain of command that could bypass ordinary institutions. It was the regime's guarantee that if the war turned, the internal front could still be controlled. The costs were embedded into the way the SS was built. The SS was not just an armed formation, it was also an economic and administrative system. In March 1942, the Inspectorate of Concentration Camps was attached to the SS main office for economics and administration. That bureaucratic adjustment linked prisoners directly to labor allocation, construction projects, and camp expansion planning. In a report dated April 30, 1942, Oswald Pohl described existing camps, their prisoner numbers, and the erection of additional camps between 1940 and 1942, including Auschwitz, Neuengamme, and others. The language is administrative. The reality is the industrialization of human captivity. For Nazi leaders, the SS was increasingly a way to convert ideology into labor supply and terror into production capacity. The SS police system also competed for Hitler's favor against other pillars of the regime, military, civil service, party authorities, and it did so through overlapping jurisdictions. In occupied Europe, higher SS and police leaders coordinated multiple forces, Ordnungspolizei, security police, SD, and Waffen-SS units. The result was not clean hierarchy, but a confusing administrative system dependent on personality, timing, and access to the top. This was how Nazi leadership functioned. Power was not streamlined. It was deliberately tangled so no rival could become independent of Hitler. The SS thrived in that chaos. By 1943, with German setbacks mounting, the SS leadership pushed for a deeper commitment, not just obedience, but complicity. In October 1943, in Poznan, Himmler spoke to senior SS officers and then to Nazi Party leaders and officials. These speeches are among the most explicit surviving statements by a top Nazi leader about the mass murder of Jews, using direct language about extermination, framed as a mission that required hardness and secrecy. The setting mattered. German-occupied Poland, in a city made a Nazi administrative center, as the war's trajectory turned against Germany. In these speeches, Himmler's purpose was not to announce policy to the public, but to bind the leadership to what had already been done and what would continue. This is where the question, what did Nazi leaders think of the SS, becomes brutally clear in structure. They did not only think of it as an organization, they used it as a mechanism for mutual entrapment. To know what was happening was to share responsibility, and to share responsibility was to reduce the possibility of defection. The documentary record of Nazi policing makes that function visible. The Gestapo and SD operated in close relationship, with the SD as an information-gathering agency and the Gestapo as an executive agency. The consolidation under Himmler as chief of the German police brought these into a single political police system. It created a model. Intelligence produces targets, police seize them, camps hold them, SS courts and SS discipline regulate the personnel, and the entire structure answers upward through a chain of command that is political rather than legal. The leadership's reliance on the SS deepened after July 20, 1944. The assassination attempt on Hitler reinforced his suspicion of traditional institutions and made loyalty an operational requirement, not just a slogan. The SS benefited from this atmosphere. The more the regime feared internal collapse, the more it leaned on the organization designed for internal control. And yet, at the same time, the SS generated resentment and fear within the regime. It pulled authority away from ministries, it expanded into areas other leaders considered their own, and it built its own status symbols, ranks, schools, ideological training, and a claim to represent the future elite of the Reich. Even within the Nazi hierarchy, that meant rivalry. The SS was powerful because it could claim to be both a military force and an ideological order, and because it held levers of police authority that others could not easily challenge. By 1945, the paradox sharpened again. As the Third Reich collapsed, the SS remained present, armed, and often autonomous in the ruins of the regime, while political leaders attempted to reorganize what was left. After Hitler's suicide on April 30, 1945, the Flensburg government formed under Karl Dönitz. Even in this final phase, the record shows continuity. Nazi symbols persisted, military discipline continued, and the administration tried to frame SS atrocities as actions undertaken in secret by Himmler and the SS, separate from the Wehrmacht and the German people. The attempt to isolate responsibility was itself a confession of what Nazi leaders thought mattered most at the end, not rebuilding the SS, but surviving its association. The collapse also exposed how deeply SS personnel had penetrated the state. Accounts of the Flensburg administration note the concentration of former SS and security service members among staff. The system had been designed so that, even when leaders fell, the apparatus remained embedded in administration, records, and personnel networks. The SS was not just a uniformed formation, it was a state infrastructure built inside another state. Then came Nuremberg. In the courtroom, the language of normal duty appeared as a defense, and the prosecution answered by showing how the SS was designed, recruited, trained, and deployed as the regime's core instrument for aggression, terror, forced labor, and mass murder. The SS, in this record, is presented not as a collection of isolated crimes, but as an integrated apparatus whose name runs like a thread through the program of the regime. This is how the SS appears when stripped of banners and slogans and reduced to documentation. It becomes what it always was, a tool for making ideology executable. That is the final irony. The SS was built to make loyalty absolute and responsibility diffuse. But the very bureaucratic thoroughness that made it effective also made it legible. Charts, orders, office names, chains of command, and reports that describe camp expansion like an infrastructure project. When the war ended, leaders who had relied on it attempted to step away from it. Yet the SS had been created precisely because the regime needed an organization that could act when others would hesitate, and could do so without legal restraint. The SS did not distort Nazi policy. It operationalized it. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.